Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today my guest is Chris Mann. He's a former Hyrox World Championship qualifier, a husband and a father. Chris and I delve into an array of topics, all centered around self-improvement and athletic performance. We discuss Chris's Hyrox season and the increased level of competitiveness required to get to the Hyrox Worlds. We also explore finding a balance between competing at Hyrox and supporting your mates, as well as Chris's personal growth journey and transformation. Chris shares his marathon training experience that allowed him to run a 3:19 Manchester Marathon. Yes, you heard that right. And discusses the impact of nutrition on performance. We delve into training strategies for endurance and how Chris leads a healthy, balanced family life while excelling in his athletic endeavours. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Chris Mann. How are you feeling after your Hyrox season's come to a close?
Yeah, good. It's been I think my second full season. Learned quite a lot, met some new people. Had good races. I think managed to sort of go a little bit better in terms of my time in each of my solo ones, and then done a couple of doubles where we've had good performances on some tough courses as well. So yeah, overall happy with where I've got to with things. At the start of the season, I'll be honest, I did want to try and qualify for like the Easter World Championships, but I just haven't got to that level. I think I was always aware that the standard was going to keep on improving as more and more people got into Hyrox, and yeah, it just needs to sort of filter down to me. I know I think where I can improve and get better, so I can do that in the future, but it just not happened this year, unfortunately.
So what? Yeah. By the way, I've seen this with like a few people because like this was my first year, but like a lot of people I know, more people qualified for the Worlds last year. Like you say, because that standard is seems to be raising up. How's your like times compared in terms of, because you qualified for Worlds last year, didn't you? And then how
Yeah,
did those?
and that was in doubles. So I qualified with one of my mates from the gym, Tom, who's a coach, and yeah, last year we qualified in the open doubles because pro doubles wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And we ran like I think it was like a 57-minute doubles at Glasgow,
Nice.
which got us qualified like through the age groups, and then we obviously then you move on to the pro weights at World Championships, and I think we were just over an hour. So that was sort of the two times we'd done up doubles before, and then this time we went back to Glasgow, but entered into the pro doubles straight away, and we ran like a 101, which we both felt was like a really good performance.
Yeah.
We trained quite hard for it. It didn't get anywhere near because there weren't as many qualifying spots in the pro doubles as there are for like the open. But yeah, it was a really solid performance. We both came off it thinking that we'd done well. But yeah, it just shows how good the standard is now that you need to get to sort of to qualify and grab one of those spots to get in the Worlds.
Yeah, for sure. Which do you enjoy better? Do you like the doubles or singles?
Like both for different reasons. So doubles is, I would say, it's more fun. It's a lot faster. And just being out there with somebody else is quite nice in some ways. Like you've always got somebody else just to have a quick chat to or push you on if you're in a little bit of a hole. And I think you feel like you've got a little bit of responsibility to them as well. So it maybe like ups your performance to some extent. And I think it's a really good way to get into it, the doubles, because you can share that experience with somebody and share a little bit of the workload too. Like singles, I quite like that for like the mental challenge of it. It's a lot more lonely out there when you're out doing it on your own. But we get to some sort of different places in your mind and how deep you have to dig to get through it. But yeah, I do enjoy that challenge of it as well. So having experienced both, I think I definitely have a blend of both going forwards. I think they're both good for different reasons.
Yeah. Do you find that Do you find you recover better after the doubles, or is it less of a stress on the body?
Yeah, probably. Because the way that we split it is like there's half, I'll do roughly half the stations.
Yeah.
So I think naturally the recovery is a little bit better, but I've not noticed a huge difference, to be honest. I mean, you're still out there for a similar amount of time.
Mm.
So yeah, to be honest, I've not noticed a massive difference, but in theory, the double should be a little bit less taxing.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Greg from the Rock Slide podcast, and we were talking about training intensity and stuff, and the stress that a Hyrox puts on you in terms of like recovering and stuff like that. And he mentioned doing the doubles. I've not done a doubles yet. I'm hopefully doing one in Manchester with another lad. I managed to convince this lad called Liam, who's a lot faster than me. So I'm definitely, depending on how you look at it, I'm getting the better half of the deal there, but it's probably going to be a slog while I'm like chasing after him.
Yeah, I think the other good reason for doing both is like you can learn a lot that will carry over into either category that you enter into, I think. So doing I did it singles first. I'd run a couple of singles before I ever did a doubles.
Yeah.
And straight away, like you notice how much faster it is. You probably learn a little bit different about like things about the stations and where you can go a little bit harder, where you need to back off and maybe conserve energy for like different points of the race. And they weren't really insights that I got from just doing singles. It was like quite one dimensional. So I think you or anyone that does both will probably definitely get aspects that they can take from the different disciplines that will help them in the other as well.
Yeah, interesting. How many races have you done this season, and do you think that was the right amount? Did you wish you did more or less?
So I've done Birmingham in October, London XL November, and Manchester January, Glasgow doubles March, and then just coming off the back of London Olympia this last weekend, so 5. It's probably too much. I think the season's quite condensed in the UK, isn't it? So between like November and the start of May, done 5 races. I think that if you're looking to peak or do like a really good performance, I think it's too many. But it depends what you want out of it. So what I learned from Manchester, for example, is like I'm from Manchester, so I knew a lot of people that were doing it that weekend. And part of the enjoyment of Hyrox is sort of, for me, is out being there with people that are doing it and experiencing it with them, like supporting them, not just my sort of own running my own race in like a selfish way. So because I did pro singles in Manchester, I wasn't starting till like I think it's 8:50 at night the start time. And I had some like good friends that were running in the morning at like the 9 o'clock wave, and I went down, supported them, and by the end of the day and the time I was sort of getting around to doing my race, even though I went home for a bit in the afternoon and tried to chill out, I was just absolutely like burnt out. So
yeah,
I think the way I'm going to do it in future is pick a couple of races to try and peak and focus on my own result, but others I'll probably look to do a couple more doubles and just accept that I'm going to be sort of around for the weekend and not just focusing on the time, but focusing on like the other benefits that you get with Hyrox, so like being part of the community, supporting other people, and like helping others sort of get through it and get into the sport as well.
Do you know? Yeah, I totally feel that, because firstly, like the late race, the late pro race. I mean, and that's where we bumped into each other at Glasgow when I was doing my first pro. It's so late. I mean, was mine at like, I think it was like 10 o'clock or something. And I drove up from Cumbria on the day, and then drove back the same night. But I think that's one of the reasons I don't want to do pro again, because it's just so late, and it's like it's I fucked myself for like 2 weeks as well, because like, maybe I should have stayed over, but my theory was like, I'm not going to sleep after that anyways.
No.
Because I'm quite sensitive to, that adrenaline and stuff. But yeah, I think, with what you were saying, it's getting that balance of like supporting your mates and stuff, because when you're really trying to nail a time or and so much has gone into it, the last thing you want to be doing is screaming your head off at your mates beforehand. I mean, you want to do that, but like you say, it just burns you out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I was thinking the same actually. Like I want to go to more, like and just maybe do a bit of spectating, or like you say, or just do doubles where there's a bit less pressure, and pick and choose those ones where I want to sort of like really go for it and be like total bunk mode in and around the event.
Yeah, I think that's the way. The way I'll do it, I think is probably. I've had experience of going to a few different ones. I think that's probably the right way to do it. I don't think the two blend very well.
No. So let's talk about, because you're big on personal growth, self-development, all that good stuff. Talk to me about like a rough overview of your journey, and sort of like where was that moment where you felt the need to sort of change your life?
Yeah, so I think it's difficult to put a particular like moment on it, but I think growing up, sort of coming out of my 20s into my late 30s, I just remember sort of having this sort of feeling that I'd not like discovered who I was at that point. I was still probably just a little bit sort of wrapped up in the paths that I'd followed, just sort of going to uni, getting a job, going out drinking every weekend. Just sort of the things that we're like socially adapted to in this country. And I remember sort of sitting down and even like saying to my wife, like, I'm not 100% sort of sure who I am, or like what I'm going to do next, or how I discover what I'm sort of going to do further down the line. And then early in my 30s, I sort of had my first son. So he came into my life, and then like immediately that's a massive change for anyone, sort of being a parent for the first time. You sort of go from being completely selfish, thinking about yourself, to it flipping round like 180 degrees, sort of like overnight. It's quite crazy, really. And then I think that was probably a bit of a trigger. And then other things, just I got into like self-development, like anyone does. Like picked up Atomic Habits for the first time, which is probably how everyone gets into self-development. It probably seems like that way anyway to me.
Mm.
And I read that and I was like, a couple of these things sort of resonate. Not everything, but I picked up on a couple of bits out of that book, and actually for once like started to apply some learnings to, and gave it time to sort of pan out and see how things worked. And just a little bit of like a couple of better habits that I picked up. So like committing to things that I'd say that I'd do, just sort of seeing through with those, and then like habit stacking, which is in Atomic Habits. So I'd never take supplements consistently, but if I just set them up next to the kettle the night before and had easy access to them, then I'd do it. Like it just happened like naturally of forming the habits. And it's just tiny little things like that that you sort of, it clicks something in your brain, and you're like, well, if I can do it with that, then I can get into better habits going to the gym. I can get my stuff ready the night before. If I know I've got a busy morning, that's going to help me go. And it's just what I've found early on was those really simple things that you just think that isn't going to make a difference. They can often be like the triggers to forming better habits. And then over time that evolved. So I got into different books, different podcasts, sort of starting to explore some curiosities, really, just listening to podcast episodes that I thought, that sounds interesting, I'll listen into that. And that'd spring into like 5 other topics from that one episode of a podcast that I'd go off and learn about. And just that journey sort of added up over time, which is probably like getting towards a decade now. It's just curiosity hasn't stopped, but I've learned different things that I like, tried different things, some have worked, some haven't. And and it's just an evolving process, really. But the biggest thing is probably lockdown. I work in like professional services in real estate or commercial property, and before lockdown, like the culture was that I'd just be in Manchester city centre in an office from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, and I would everything else just fitted around that. But lockdown put like a hard stop to that, and it just enabled me to sort of take a step back, see that that wasn't really what I wanted to do, or sort of the best use of my time, given where I was at with like a young family, and I'd gotten out of shape, had some sort of lifestyle habits that I wanted to change, and yeah, lockdown just, I think like for other people, just gave you like a really good opportunity to stop and reflect on where things were at and what you could change going forward.
So, yeah, you mentioned there about lockdown being sort of a big catalyst, but then you did actually say something about 10 years prior. So was there something that had happened like 10 years ago that sort of triggered that sort of like curiosity to explore?
I think I've always had this sort of drive inside me to want to do better, and I think where the 10 years thing is probably where I was like, I'd realised that I didn't necessarily sort of feel aligned with myself or where I wanted to get to in the long term, and I did start a sort of journey of personal development then, I guess, but it took time to get traction with it. So when I say like 10 years, that was when I probably had the realisation that I'm going to look to sort of try and change something here. But it was very slow, like the first couple of years, or that the first block of 5 years until we got to lockdown. It was stop start and didn't really sort of manifest itself into real change until around that sort of start of lockdown, really.
And was that when you sort of leaned into the whole atomic habits thing?
I'd had it before lockdown, but I came back to it, and I'd done a couple of little bits that had made some improvement, but coming back to it in lockdown with that sort of fresh, like reframe of sort of stepping away from the routine of like working in like in an office Monday to Friday, it just sort of helped me layer it, add a couple of layers to it, which then that was really like the kickstart of it all, and that was the catalyst of like making some real change then.
Yeah, and if anyone's listening hasn't read or listened to Atomic Habits, then by James Clear, then highly recommend. I picked it up. I think it was around the time it must have come out, which I believe was maybe a couple of years before lockdown. And I remember like listening to it, and like you say, things like habit stacking. A lot of this stuff was kind of like innate. Like I'd been doing some of it. You know, whenever I'd made good progress in my life, I'd been doing this stacking thing. So, you know, whether it be eating a certain way and then after that doing a certain thing or whatever, because, you know, and I remember really leaning into, right, I'm going to do, you know, like the habit chart. I'm going to tick off my boxes and think about all the things that I want to do. And I was in a relationship at the time, and one of my habits was do something nice for this girl's name. Or it was something like that. I remember her saying to me once, like, you shouldn't need a habit chart to, like, you know, she was like offended by it. And I'm like,
yeah,
but that you're missing the point. Like, I love you, so I'm trying to be more intentional, to be reminded, you know, because we all know what it's like being on autopilot in a relationship, and it's, you know, it's useful to have those prompts. But yeah, I ended up revisiting it a load of times, and probably the biggest was like 3 years ago, it's interesting. We've both got this sort of 3-year sort of time span, which you were talking about alcohol and stuff. And mine started 3 years ago as well. So where did alcohol come into this? And what was your sort of like emotional health like at the time? Because obviously we talk a lot about fitness and in personal growth, but what about the emotional stuff?
I think generally fine. Like I wasn't unfortunate in that I've never like had depression. Like I've had times where you get the odd day or two where you just obviously sort of feeling a bit low or stuck in a bit of a rut. And I think emotionally, going back to that point where I said like I didn't really sort of feel like I knew who I was or where I was going. Probably emotionally, like the hardest part for me has been like just feeling like I was stuck in a little bit of a rut, like going through the same routine regularly, struggling to make progress on some of the things that I felt like I wanted to. So emotionally, like I think I've always been pretty steady. Like I've got good networks around me. Like been married for like 12 years, got a great relationship with my wife, got friends that like are nearby, really good group of mates, parents live nearby. I think like compared to some people, I've got a really good like local network. I live in the town where I was born, and a lot of people are still around. Like some people have ventured out, and I've been to like off to uni, worked in different cities, but come back, and I think it's been great, like from an emotional support point of view, to have those like local networks and access to a lot of people that you've got relationships with.
Where were those communities formed? Like, because obviously you mentioned you've got quite a good support group of people. Like, are they from school or work or the gym?
Yeah, so got like a group of friends. I think there's like 6 or 7 of us from primary school.
Wow.
Who I'm still close with. Like, we've always been really close. Been like best men at each other's weddings, all the sort of stag do's, different sort of trips like throughout uni and spending time together. Like we've always had that consistent relationship with a group of lads from primary school, and we make the effort despite everyone having families now, like living in different parts of the country, like to meet up. So like next weekend we're all going up to like the Lake District. We've got like an Airbnb.
Oh, nice.
Just the lads to sort of have some like focused time together. So there's that group. I've played golf since I was about 12, and I've got like a really sort of good group of mates that I know through golf. People through uni, people through work. More recently, as like I've gotten into fitness and sort of joined gyms, different groups of people from like the gym that I go to, other gyms that I train with, and like coaching rugby and football for like my kids as well. There's those groups. So there's probably like 5 or 6 groups of different people that I'm involved with where I've got some like strong relationships, and definitely I feel the benefit of that sort of in every area of life. I guess it's like strength of your network, isn't it? Which is really important.
Wow. Yeah. It's I think your community is like feels to me like the biggest indicator of how your emotional health is likely to be, because there's something about like it's almost like there's no chance to get really depressed or down when you've got so much going on and you've got so many people around you, and that's why the gym is so important to so many people. Community gyms, at least, because if you don't have that network, as such, you're put into this. It's like this microcosm of like almost like how a community would have formed like 200 years ago. It's like the size of a village. Everyone kind of knows each other, and you know, and it's really beautiful. So, you know, I think it doesn't surprise me you having that sort of stable emotional health in having all that stuff around you. And also, I think it's surprising. Maybe maybe I'm wrong here, but like more often than not, a lot of people that get into something like Hyrox or running marathons tend to come at it from a different angle. Like it almost saves them because they're going through a bad emotional time, like a rock bottom sort of moment, and then they get into Hyrox. And I'm also speaking from my own experience, by the way, so it's sort of like colors the lens at which I look at this through. But it's almost kind of more remarkable that you were in that situation where you had all these people around you and you had a nice life and stuff, and yet you felt there was something more, and then you pushed on and have been able to achieve some really amazing times at Hyrox and qualifying for the Worlds and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's just one of the other things that I sort of meant to say there is I think like the more access you have to people, you realise that like everyone's going through similar stuff. Like if you just isolate yourself or you feel a little bit lonely, I think there's a tendency to perhaps think that it might be just something that's just happening to you, but you'd be surprised, like everyone's got the same sort of challenges, the same fears, sort of things that they're worried about, and just sort of being exposed and being around like people and communities, I think just makes you realise that, and you sort of understand it better, and it leads to conversations, like you said, with the communities. I think like the gym's one that's like really, really open and vulnerable because people are there, like they're sort of laying it all out in terms of effort and expose themselves or pushing the boundaries a little bit, and that fear. And I think it just opens them up. And even sort of the most experienced people, or the people that you think are like they've got everything absolutely nailed and they're flying, they'll still be worried about going doing a Hyrox, or how they're going to perform, or whether the time they get is a reflection of who they are as a person. Or I think, yeah, the more people you speak to, it just resonates that everyone's got sort of similar issues that they're dealing with. Being in those communities just helps you sort of get through them, I think.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, everyone's got shit going on. It's just different people are at different levels of vulnerability. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I overshare, but I'm like, yeah, I just have everything on the table. So I think having that sometimes you can start to believe sometimes that you're a bit, I don't mean this in a narcissistic way, but like a bit special, like, oh, only me, or I'm the one that's thinking like this, because sometimes other people don't open up about it. And I think that's why it is important to be vulnerable, for everyone to be vulnerable, because it's like, oh, fucking hell, yeah, like it isn't just me that feels this way. But getting that balance, because not everyone wants to like share everything. It's yeah, I think that's important as well. And I think it would be different. It's definitely different as a father, right?
Yeah.
Because I often think about like my dad and stuff, and I sometimes think, he must be going through like loads of shit, and I wish he was a bit more vulnerable with me. But like, he's he's like the patriarch, so he's got to be strong and stuff. So I kind of understand it. Do you know what I mean? If my old man was bashing on about his attachment style to me or something, then but yeah, who knows? Who knows? Maybe we need to have that conversation.
I think, yeah, but I think you can do it in the right way, and it sounds like from how you described that, and this isn't something I realised until recently, but understanding yourself is probably the step that I missed in that first period of like personal development. I didn't get to the bottom of who I am before taking the steps. I think that's like just sort of witnessing what other people do. I think that's probably quite common, is that you don't really get to the point of understanding yourself and where you want to get to before you embark on this journey. Maybe it's just part of the process, but I think if people focused on, look, I'm conditioned to some extent by my environment because of things that I was taught by parents, society, wanting to fit in, all those things that you need to do as you're forming your character as you grow up.
Yeah.
Having that point just to reflect and say, like, that's fine, like, I understand that's part of like human psychological development, but now I'm going to, for this next part of my life, want to start and really sort of get into who I am. That's probably the best place I'd suggest somebody could start is getting understanding. Otherwise, you're just climbing up the wrong ladders and then you're having to come back down before you get up the next one.
Yeah, like that self-awareness is such a key skill. And the interesting thing about self-awareness is you're always peeling back layers. So you'll be in a situation like, oh yeah, I understand myself, and then you might spot a thread, and then you're like, okay, I've not noticed that before, and then you sort of peel back a layer. And I do think, have you ever done any therapy, by the way?
No, I haven't. No.
How did you? So when you talk about like understanding yourself, like, are there any ways that you've like approached that?
I think I just like listening to like that voice in your head, it's just giving you like direction and that curiosity point, just exploring like curiosities and trial and error, trying things out that are of interest and then getting into them and thinking, actually, this isn't for me. And it's just that iteration, I think, is how I've arrived at it. I think, and it has to just start with a commitment, really, that you're just going to try different things and work on what does and get rid of what doesn't work. If you've committed to that sort of self-discovery or self-realization sort of journey. But I've not done therapy, but I know it's getting more popular, and I know people that have and said it's amazing, and it's not something I wouldn't rule it out. I think it'd be really interesting, but at this stage, I think I just enjoy the process of like learning it myself as well. So I've read around some of the topics and applied what I have learned, but yeah, I appreciate that sort of speaking with specialists and things that people that do it for a career would be useful. And yeah, I think it's probably something that I'll do at some point.
Yeah, I like I did some bits like when I was a bit younger, but it was mainly through. So if you go to the NHS with like anxiety or any sort of issues, they'll do this thing called I think they still call it First Step. It's well cringe. First Step, and then you ring up and then you go for an appointment, and it's basically CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's sort of like, and I'm totally bro science in this, I can't remember exactly, but it's more like looking at like habits and triggers and sort of the more practical steps, because essentially what they want to do is get you to a more functional level as soon as possible and then get you out of there. So it's quite useful for me, when I was younger and got me through some little bits. But I've recently just started psychotherapy, which is through BetterHelp, and I got matched with this therapist, and I'm fairly new into it. But with psychotherapy, I don't know if you know, but it's more like, why do you hold that belief? Why do you react in that way? Why are you telling yourself that story about yourself? And that's been really fascinating. Because
how long have you been doing that for then?
I think this is my fourth week. So pretty early, and I'm still telling her everything about my story and stuff, and because I mean, yeah, you probably know from like just chatting to me now. He's like, I go really deep into stuff, so I'm like, oh, and this, and then there's that, and then oh, and this happened, and then I'm flashing all over the spot, and I'm trying to like map out my experience. But it's fascinating because I'm so interested in it anyways. I'm fascinated by the mind. I'm fascinated with how it works. And I'm like, all right, and that, yeah, and that must be because of this. And then I'm kind of like, and then I'm like, fucking hell, this is my life. And then I'll like just start crying or something because you're like, this is my trauma we're talking about. So no, yeah, it's good. I've actually got a session after this, so it's a
Yeah, no, so it sounds interesting. I know, like my wife's brother and his girlfriend are therapists, and like one, he works for like local authority, like probably along some of the similar lines of what you were describing with the NHS, like stuff linked to that. And then she works on BetterHelp as a therapist as well. So yeah, it's always interesting to speak to them and like understand the process.
Yeah, I think it's you just never, and I actually started I engaged a therapist at the point in time in my life where I actually felt the happiest, the
Yeah,
happiest, because I'd noticed a few little threads, a few little like resentments, like, oh, where's that coming from? That little bit of anger, and it's like spotting it now rather than waiting for it to build up, and in 5 years' time having a fucking breakdown. I'm like, oh, what's that? You know, it's like spotting cancer early or something, isn't it? It's like spotting a tumor and like, okay, let's weed it out. Let's look into it. But yeah, it's cool. It's a very strange one. It's enjoyable, but then at the same time, you can feel quite raw afterwards. And then but yeah, it's a bit like, you ever go for like a really good deep tissue massage? And then
yeah,
afterwards, you kind of like, you're relaxed, but there's like this feeling of kind of like, you're almost exhausted because you can feel like all these toxins have been like flushed out of you. Feels a bit like that, but like
yeah.
emotion.
A bit like relief, but not full relief.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's something there still. You're feeling a bit raw. Something's come out here. We've made something. We've shone a light on something. But yeah, no, it's cool. So anyone listening, I would highly recommend. No affiliation, by the way. So talk to me. What about alcohol specifically? Was there anything in particular that sort of made you wanted to quit that?
It's I didn't set off to quit like the last time I had a drink. So I remember it really clearly. Like the last drink that I had was my birthday in 2021. The day after my birthday, I woke up after having like three bottles of beer in the house because I think we were in like one of the last lockdowns. And I woke up with like a hangover. And I always got bad hangovers, but this was like particularly bad given that I'd only had three bottles of beer. And I was just like, just don't want to do this anymore. It was just, yeah, I really struggled with the hangovers. And it wasn't just sort of the morning after, it'd be like 2 or 3 days after. And not necessarily that one time, but if I went out for a weekend or on a Friday, I'd still be feeling the effects on a Tuesday. And that was part of it. I never really loved alcohol or like the thought of just having a beer because it was a beer or having a glass of wine because it was a nice glass of wine. I didn't enjoy it like from that side of things. It was always just a mechanism to sort of go out and blow off a bit of steam or make a night out more fun. And I guess it's just circumstances as well. Like I'm at the age, or I was at the age when I decided to stop. Everyone has stopped going out as much. the opportunities weren't there to go out sort of every Friday or Saturday if you wanted to. So that's definitely helped. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't something intentional. Like that morning, I am not ever drinking again. It's just something that evolved. So went a couple of weeks without really noticing, and then it got to a month, and I was reflected a bit and thought, actually, I feel loads better. I've got loads more done at work. That month-end deadline for like finance wasn't as stressful as it usually was because I got more done in the month. And then I thought, well, carry on with this. And then you get to 3 months, and then there'd be another 3 big things, big realizations that actually, yeah, like I've managed to stick to the gym for 3 months properly for the first time ever. Jo, my wife, I'm not having to deal with the bits of her frustrations where I've been hungover and like I'm waking up on a Sunday and having a full day where I actually want to spend it with the kids and making the most out of that day, as opposed to getting out of bed that morning and just sort of wondering how many hours it is so I can get back in bed and go back to sleep and try and get some proper rest. And it's just little points on the journey really that have made me realise that I'm just so much better off without it, which has just made it not make sense to go back.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you're looking for like a cognitive enhancer, or if you're looking to take like your work or your career up like 30%, maybe even more, then yeah. Quitting alcohol, or at least quitting the hangovers, quitting getting absolutely rat-assed is a big mover. Like, I often think there's no chance I'd be doing the podcast if I was still drinking. I honestly just think, and I've got a lot of shit done and done a lot of projects and stuff throughout my life when I did drink. So who knows? Maybe not, but I don't know. Certainly the gym as well. Like that feeling. There's nothing like that feeling, like you say, that hangover, that like the beer fear, where it's just like everything is coated in this like anxiety. It's like,
yeah. And one of these realizations that I referred to is, say it was 2 days that I just wasn't at my best after drinking, and I'd conservatively go out and drink, say, 30 times a year. I wouldn't go out every week at the age that I was at, but if I did, it was like to the max, like sort of going out doing a proper session. So that's like 60 days when you think about it, and it's 2 months that you're sort of getting back. It is sort of one of the things that after a few months I just stopped and I was like, that's big. That, like, if I'm someone who's thinking I want to make improvement in my life and sort of feel like I'm fulfilling my potential, if someone came to me and said, well, I'll give you another couple of months this year to work on stuff that you think is going to move the needle, then like you can't put a price on that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've realised, is that I wasted so much time just being hungover or not being able to function at anything like my best, just because I've been out drinking.
Mm-hmm. Have any of your mates done the same, out of interest?
But my wife doesn't drink, so we stopped at like a similar point. So
yeah,
that makes things easier. I've got like friends, got friends that are doing it. Some have like gone for like maybe 6 months and then experimented with going back and are sort of finding their own way out of it, or sort of whether they want to actually sort of come away from it completely. And then we've got others who really enjoy having a drink and it just wouldn't ever appeal to them. So there's a couple of people that I know that don't drink, like Tom that I mentioned, who do Hyrox with. He doesn't. A couple of other lads at the gym have sort of, they've started their journey without doing it as well and feeling better. and a couple of other people in that network don't, but the vast majority do. And I think, each their own. I think I know some people sort of say that they can go out and do it and function, but that just wasn't me. So I guess my approach has got to be a little bit different if I want to do the things that I want to do, because alcohol and sort of being productive for me just don't go together.
What do you think? What do you think's the biggest driver there? Because you talk about like having more free time and stuff, but is it a combination of things? Is it like Hyrox? Is the one thing that seems to stand out? That's because 3 years is a long time, and I imagine you've had some moments where you've thought, oh, it would be nice, just have a beer with the lads or whatever.
Yeah. It's things like Hyrox, the training. I guess not just Hyrox, but just the ability to be able to train with a level of intensity and consistency to actually like make progress. Whether that's in like Hyrox or running or marathon training, and like the other part is just like having time with the family. I could probably fit in training if I did drink, but it wouldn't be as productive. But I can have just like dedicated time to family, which is like really important to me. You can't do everything, can you? So if you're gonna start spinning plates, some of them are gonna fall. And I think like the family and fitness and that side of things are like the biggest drivers for me. So that's where I fit in those things first.
Yeah, I think there's something about like when you don't have alcohol that makes you appreciate those. I was thinking of like more like serotonin versus like a dopamine. So like, those kind of like really nice family moments just seem to make you like appreciate those and make you a bit more sensitive to those positive feelings, and obviously family time is is right up there, because there's nothing worse than I did step parenting for a little while, and being hungover, and certainly if you were like the main caregiver for the day, there's nothing like the shame, and because you don't feel totally present, because you just, like you say, you're thinking, oh, this is awful. Whereas the flip side of that is, when you're sober and present and rested, you can really focus on those moments that are so precious, if you've got a family.
Yeah. I reckon it's like, in hindsight, I think alcohol for me was like, it was just escapism. And I think no matter who you are, you need an element of escapism, because we live like really busy lives now, don't we? Like everybody, I can't remember the last time I spoke to somebody when I said like, how's things, are you busy? Like they said, oh no, I could do with picking a bit more up actually. Like everyone just seems to be flat out all the time. So escapism is important. And I think alcohol is probably like the default for escapism in the UK anyway. And it's not that I've done away with escapism. I think like a Hyrox or training is that now. And it's just that's more productive for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's just alcohol's so instantaneous, that escape, isn't it? It's just like,
yeah. It's easily accessible, isn't it, as well? Like you can just go. You're never too far from a pub or a shop either. It's just readily available.
So what about do you have a sports background?
No. I've always enjoyed sports, but I've never played at like a high level. Just played football for school, and then gave that up in secondary school. Didn't really sort of play football much then. Switched to golf probably in like my early teens, and played golf quite a lot. like school holidays and summers would all be like focused around that. But yeah, fitness wise, just dropped off really. Like in uni, I remember like joining the gym and it like go down in Freshers Week for a day or two and then not go again until like before Christmas. Just that like cycle of like a couple of sessions and then losing interest. Did a couple of like did a marathon in 2012, the Manchester Marathon, where I didn't really have any base level of fitness before doing that. Just trained for it and then again like did it and then just lost interest. Just didn't have any consistency again and then picked it up really in just before lockdown and then forming those better habits through lockdown. Like it's just ingrained now. Like it's a massive part of my life and it's quite a recent thing, to be honest. It's just something that I don't know why, but just managed to build some consistency around it and really felt the benefit and got the other aspects of it as well, like we were saying before, like community, meeting new people, all those benefits sort of coming together have just made it sort of stick since starting up just before lockdown, really.
Other than that consistency, what do you think have been like the biggest movers for you making so much progress in your fitness?
I'm competitive, so I think that's why like Hyrox is good, and I always tend to have something in the diary, even if it's not a Hyrox, because it just focuses my mind. I'll set like a goal around a performance-based goal, and then really sort of structure everything around that. And I think if I stopped doing that, and I think I'd definitely lose a bit of the intensity where everyone has it where sort of the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you're sort of thinking, can I be bothered today? But if I've set a goal and like vocalize that, whether it's just a bit of a goal on Instagram or saying to friends or whatever, I'm gonna get this time, that's really helped as well. And then I guess it's just formed a little bit of my identity as well now. I like going to the gym, catching up with people, speaking to them. I like mates who might want to sort of start on a similar journey. Like it's been nice to speak with them and sort of be able to help them or guide them a little bit at the start. So yeah, it's just something that I think was always there, but I just never gave it enough time or a day to sort of come out. And it's back to that sort of self-realization stuff. I think I've always been competitive. I've always been into sport, but just got a little bit wrapped up in everything else that was going on. I was trying to build a career and start a family and stuff, and it just took a bit of a back seat. But it's probably always been something that's really been important to me, but I haven't prioritised it enough.
And what about, because performing well, there's like two key components, isn't there? You've got your dedication and your discipline with your training, which is gonna be most of gonna affect your performance, and then the other thing that's going to affect your performance is your performance. And they're two things, and it's like obviously competitiveness comes in with all those things, maybe slightly more in the performance side. So when you are performing, do you have any sort of like mental tricks and frameworks? Like what's driving you to, like, are you the sort of person that's pretty much on full send during like a Hyrox or a marathon? Like, yeah. Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, it does, definitely. No, I don't consider myself to be one of those that can just go out and red light. Like I find it difficult. Like I'm naturally a bit of an overthinker, and I think I probably plan things out and this is something that I need to work on, but like planning things out probably too much, and I like know roughly where I should be to achieve the time that I've set as a goal halfway through a Hyrox, and if I'm ahead of that, then I wouldn't naturally sort of kick on. I think I'd be a little bit protective of it and no, like, were you doing what you should have done planning wise? Keep going and it'll work out at the end. So yeah, like mentally unlocking that sort of next level of like performance and taking the shackles off really is something that I'm trying to work out how to do better. I think I'm probably a little bit too over considered on the performance side, whereas I need to just trust everything that I've done a little bit more in practice and get into that sort of full send mentality a bit more.
Yeah, like I always think, I don't know if I'm like, have I got a bit more? Could I have pushed that a bit harder? And it's getting that balance, isn't it? And then you have some people who are just so good at just sitting in that pain where they can train like a bag of shite and still perform.
Yeah.
But I think it's just we've all got our strengths and stuff, but that's what's just like so interesting about, this stuff. And Hyrox specifically, there's something about it, isn't it? Because it never changes and you can really, obviously you're quite analytical, so you can really start to delve into like all the splits and stuff and where can I improve here. So if you're the sort of person who likes to plan things out, it's it works quite well. It tracks quite well for that personality type. Have you have you been on a plan? Have you done your own coaching? How's that look like?
I've tried like various different things. So I've used online coaching quite a bit. I've used like Hunter McIntyre's one at some points. I've used like Tim Vinish and Michael Sandbach had one at one point that I've used. Currently I'm using it's called Team Reach Training, it's led by Taylor Hayne, who's an American guy who won the doubles at the World Championships, and it's been like a really good mix of like athletic performance and like structure around different periodization, which I'm using that on an app sort of predominantly at the minute, but I've come off doing the Manchester Marathon as well, like in April, and since start of the year really the focus has been around the marathon as opposed to like Hyrox specifically. So I'm gonna just have a couple of weeks off now. I feel like my body needs a rest after doing like the marathon and 2 Hyrox already this year. Sort of get through, have a bit of a break at the end of May with the family, and then sort of get back into some strength stuff in June, and then work through and set some new dates for like Hyrox and get some sort of specific training around that based on which ones I'm going to do. But yeah, I've used like online coaching quite a bit, and the different apps that you can use. I found them really useful because it just gives you that bit of flexibility that I need as well. Like if there's long sessions planned on, say, like a day where I've got to go into the office for something, I'll just flip them around and having it on an app. It just makes it easy just to have a little bit of flexibility.
Which you've done? Is there any that you'd recommend? Which have done give you the most so far? Like obviously you're clearly like trying some different approaches out, but is there any that stand out?
Yeah, I really like the one that I'm on at the minute, the Team Reach training. So you can there on Instagram, like just type in Team Reach. It's really varied, and they have different programs, so you can go like quite intense if you somebody who wants to do a couple of sessions on certain days. They'll have a program for that, or one that's aimed more like aesthetics, or just a sort of single session day split.
And is that
it seems to have like
is that Hyrox specific, or is that
it's like hybrid training specific? So there's a lot of Hyrox and it blends with Deca and things like that as well. But the benefit of it is like some of the bigger events they'll tailor like the block to meet with the date of the event. So like at the minute, there's like a focus on people that are training for the Worlds. Everything's geared up on the latest block of training for like that. So you've got access to the training plan that their athletes that are going to the Worlds will be working on.
Right.
So it's generic in a sense in that anyone can get onto it and use it, but it's tailored towards people doing Hyrox or the big Deca events. It's like a hybrid program rather than being sort of a specific Hyrox one, though.
Right, got you. Interesting. Yeah, I will. I'll put a link. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So, what about? Talk to me about Manchester Marathon. How is your training for that? And also, what do you think? What's the effect it's had on your Hyrox?
So training for it was good. I think I got a ticket in late January, so I decided sort of in just about enough time to sort of start getting a decent block of training in, and then the weather like near where I live it's so bad. Like the UK weather, like in the north of England over winter, it just makes training for a marathon around that time of year brutal. So at the start, it was a bit of stuff like indoors, like treadmill based stuff, which I don't really like doing because I don't think you get the benefit of running on treadmills. It just doesn't seem for me anyway to like translate into progress when you're actually outside running. So it didn't start off great, and then Glasgow Hyrox got closer, so I switched to a little bit more Hyrox specific stuff. So I probably really started focusing on the marathon training at the end of the first week in March, and I used. Have you heard of Runner? That's like another app.
Runner. Yeah, I think so.
So I used that because it's really good in that you can download their program and it'll sync with your watch. So on like some sessions where you've got like an interval based session where you're really trying to hit like a specific split time, you'll be able to look down at your watch and it'll tell you like whether you're ahead of pace, on pace, or behind. And I found that really useful. So focus using that Runner app pretty much specifically all the way through to like the race at the April.
So Runner had did you say Runner had like a marathon plan, or
I think they have like a man. They do it based on event, so you could go on and say I'm going to do Berlin Marathon, and it'll give you a program based on whenever the race date is.
Right.
So they're probably all the same plans. To be honest, I doubt there's much variation, but they set it. They set your sort of structure around the race date, and I think they have like 16, 12, and 8 week plans.
Yeah, that's cool. It integrates with a watch.
Yeah, I found it really useful. But yeah, training was good. Like, definitely felt like I got better at running. Like, I found some of the faster interval sessions quite difficult. Like, there were some days where I'd go out and I just wouldn't get even near the splits that I was supposed to. And that was a little bit like disheartening.
In terms of pace or... Right.
Pace, yeah. And I feel like naturally I'm probably a little bit more naturally suited to endurance and like keep going rather than going fast. Is how sort of it feels like my body wants to act. So yeah, some of those sessions were like I was way off the paces, like miles off. I'd be missing splits by like 30 seconds in some instances, and it was disheartening. But yeah, I stuck with it, and then a week or two later, I might hit them or like surprise myself and it feel not too bad. So you definitely just was quite disciplined and just didn't get too disheartened from things like that, which I know is easy to do based on stuff I've done in the past. Trust in the process, I guess, if you want the cliche. And yeah, it all went to plan. I think a big part of it is staying like injury free as well, isn't it? So I was lucky in that respect. And then yeah, just turned up and ran on the day. Felt good. Like the first 30k, I was like right where I wanted to be, and then the last 10, it was just not even really like a mental battle, but my legs just didn't want to fire anymore. So it was a battle in terms of sort of the physical side, but I felt really good. But I guess it's only the first one that I've done in over 10 years, so still relatively inexperienced at sort of running that distance. But yeah, just really interesting. Good to be out sort of training, having that time out on the road on your own, thinking things through, sort of not just the running, but like the mental sort of headspace and clarity that you can get from it is really good, and learn other things from it as well. So one of the biggest takeaways I got from this block, other than the running benefits, was that how we or I just eat habitually as opposed to like fueling strategically, just day to day. I think like we all just follow habits, don't we, when we're eating like breakfast, lunch, dinner. At weekends, probably like go a little bit off the rails and get sort of takeaways and things, or eat to like excess sometimes the wrong things. But you can really notice when you're doing some of those longer runs what the impact like nutrition is on having on your performance. So I've definitely like come away from it knowing that, and we'll focus a bit more on like nutrition. It's brought it to the front of mind, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's absolutely huge. Like I'm pretty disciplined with when it comes to my food, and like I went on holiday for like only like 4 nights recently, and I just give myself permission to obviously treat myself, whatever, and not drinking as well. So you go to when you're abroad is like coffee. So you're stopping everywhere for coffee, and what goes really nice with coffee is cake. So I just felt like I was eating loads of sweet stuff, and then I actually noticed like my cognitive performance like dropped huge. Like I just wasn't thinking the same. Having all this like glucose, excess glucose, and then when I came back and I was like, right, I need to get back into the gym, and I suffered like real bad cramp in a training session, and it just really brought home like that is literally the effect of a poor diet just for a few days. When you're training at such an intense level, and obviously different people have different propensities when it comes to like electrolyte imbalance and that. But yeah, I think, yeah, just to back up what you're saying, nutrition's huge. Certainly when you're looking to like perform just that little bit extra and not just, get through it. What was it 3:20 your marathon time?
Yeah, just under that. Yeah, 3:19. Just don't forget. Sub
Fuck
3:20
yeah.
is like what I like to say.
That's awesome. So 3:19. What about like in the weeks, like how much mileage did you do? Were you doing, and how close did you get to the sort of marathon miles? And sorry, one last thing. Did you run at your race pace consistently, or did you just save, like, did you just do intervals at your race pace, if that makes sense?
So what was the first question?
What was the first question? I was asking around that 3:20 time. So, like, what was your mileage like? So,
Yeah.
and were you hitting
Oh yeah.
those?
So yeah.
Yeah. What was the biggest mileage you did, like, leading up to it?
So biggest. It's all kilometers.
No,
I
I
don't
like
know why, but
kilometers.
I work
That's
in
great.
kilometers. So the longest run was supposed to be 34k, but I did 32 because I ran out of time with a call that I had in work. So 32k was the longest run that I did as part of the block. I used to do, like, with having the family commitments and stuff, I did all my long runs on a Friday morning, which wasn't ideal because I had to get up really early to get a bit of fuel in and then get back before sort of the family stuff kicked off. But I just wouldn't have gotten them in on a Saturday or Sunday. So did that. Yeah, 32k was the longest that I did. I think the longest week I had in terms of mileage or kilometerage was about 88, 89 kilometers one week. And then as it got closer to the race, in terms of sort of race pace, that the way that the app programmed runs was that you'd go out and do a long run that might be like 10 kilometers at a steady pace, and then 8k at what you was like envisaged to be the race pace. So trying to run on fatigued legs at the pace that you want to do, and then it would never really repeat the same session twice, so it didn't feel like it was. But then you might go out and do like accumulating sets. So you go out and do 5k at like a warm up, 5k steady, 5k just over your envisaged marathon pace, then 5k trying to sort of just go under it. So it's like just accumulation of it really, and break it into blocks as opposed to just going out running at that pace for the whole run.
Interesting. Yeah. The reason I was like going, wow, when you're saying that before is I did this accidentally last night. I think you might have seen on my Instagram story. So I'm not on plan at the moment, but I do have a half marathon in about 4 weeks' time. So, I've been cramming in some training and obviously trying to get that balance of sitting at that pace that I want to be running at, but obviously not fatiguing yourself too much. And it was interesting because literally I did that by accident last night, because I went out on a zone 2. I was like, I'll just go steady state, keep it in strict zone 2. If I need to slow down, I will do. And like I said, that must have been about 50 minutes. And and then I managed to get myself lost. And it's like, it's Walney Island, which is near where I live, but yeah, that's just obviously not an area that I've been to a lot. Like, I'm kind of like, hang on a minute, is that the way back? And then I realized I was fucking ages away from where I needed to be. And then because I'd been out for 50 minutes on doing zone 2, you may connect with this, then it was really hard my heart rate started ramping up loads, regardless of, I was really slowing down. It was like zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. Obviously that's to do with that tank, that capacity that you've got to be at that. And so I was like, well, I'm not walking all the way back. So I ended up doing the last bit at quite a fast pace. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, I wonder if this is a good strategy. Like, because I was like, I suppose like I've kind of pre-fatigued, but obviously not at a highly stressful level. And then I'm running. So fascinating how you literally just said that was one of the strategies. So I'm well chuffed with myself there.
Yeah. You've looked out there. It's worked out well.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's cool. What about did you do much zone training specifically?
It wasn't really focused on like zones in terms of like focus on the zone, but it was just I established they call it like conversational pace is how they describe it in that app. So I guess that was really like the high zone to maybe just getting into like lower zone 3. Like I established what my pace was really quite early on in it, and then just sort of stuck to that. So it was around like 5 minute a kilometre to just over that, perhaps, depending on sort of what the conditions were. Like the difficult thing there is like it's just really hilly, so you can't go on a run more than 2k without having to sort of come up against an uphill somewhere, and then obviously like a downhill as well. So that was one of the biggest challenges of the training block, was that I realised early on where if someone's telling me that I need to hit a specific pace to progress, I can't do it on the conditions that are like on my doorstep. So I had to get out to like a track and find a track near me, and about 15, 20-minute drive, but the benefit that I got to going somewhere flat to do those sessions was like immense, because I just wouldn't have got the intended output from the session if I'd have done it near me, because I'd have just ended up like running up hills or running down hills. It's just not consistent, is it?
No, it's totally different. Sort of like driving through, like sprinting on a track or whatever. Like it's very different to running around the streets and crossing roads and stuff like that. What about like nutrition? What has your sort of your general approach been, and have you sort of figured that out yourself, or did you get a nutritionist, or was it part of your program?
I've never had like specific help other than just like the bits that come off maybe off the back of a PT or sort of an induction at like a gym. Trial and error again, really understanding what works. I think most of the time I'm on like probably like an 80%, an 80-20. Having kids and sort of all the stuff that comes with that, I never want to be in a position where I'm saying, I can't have an ice cream, or we're not having takeaway or whatever. So really flexible. I guess like the only principle I have the vast majority of the time is like that 80-20 split of 80% eating like good whole foods, in like moderation or in line with sort of the calories and macros that I need, or that I've sort of established that I want to work on. And the things that have moved the needle like the most for me is like if I've got a holiday coming up or an event and I feel like I just need to lose a little bit of weight or sharpen up, is I'll go to like intermittent fasting. So eat like 16 hours off and have like an 8-hour eating window, and I'd usually like do that 12 till 8 p.m. So just eat between those hours, and then not outside of that window. So like between 8 p.m. and 12, just not have anything other than like water or a black coffee. And that just seems to get my body sort of kick it into a state where it wants to just like burn a little bit of the excess weight off, and I can manage my calories a little bit easier as well, just eating in that shorter window.
Yeah, man, I love 16/8. It's I came across it 3 years ago, probably. And yeah, exactly the same window as you. Yeah, first meal at 12, and then stop at 8 o'clock. But I recently I got out of it for a while, and then have you ever done OMAD, 1 meal a day? It's quite a nice one if you ever fancy like changing it up. So basically the difference being is you'd have your dinner tonight, and then tomorrow you just wait until dinner time. And it's like a little bit of a next level, in terms of like getting into ketosis. So I bought some like piss strips once that you can wee on these strips, and it'll tell you if you're in ketosis, if there's any ketones. And it does tend to come in like a little bit later in the day. But yeah, no, it's cool. I think for a long time when I was training Hyrox, do you do 16/8 while you're in season, or are you more conscious on getting the calories in?
I think I would. So I've done it in like the lead up. I'll do that because I just feel like like body composition wise, it just helps me monitor my weight a little bit easier
before a competition.
Yeah. So like maybe in like the 4 weeks leading up to it, and then there'll be certain sessions that I might do fasted, but like the ones where I really need to go and like put an effort in, if it's like a 60 to 70 minute like Hyrox in, then I would wait until I've had at least like my first meal of the day before I'd go and do that.
Yeah, I think just allowing your body to like just mix it up a little bit, because for a long time, where I would say like probably within our gym, you pick up on the habits of everyone around you, don't you? And so everyone's quite big on, getting the fuel in, making sure you've got plenty of calories. And I did notice an increase in my performance when I did that. But did I feel better? No. I always feel better when I'm doing a bit of fasting. I think it's and you have to sometimes remember, like, why did I get into going to the gym or Hyrox? Was actually longevity, not necessarily about getting the best Hyrox time. So sometimes you sort of like take a step back. If we're doing this for being healthy, then I think it's definitely useful to throw in a little bit of fasting to keep your body guessing and, keep yourself insulin sensitive as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, if you zoom out far enough, then whilst it's important, like Hyrox is a 70-80 minute workout, isn't it? And whilst it's important, the result, I think, getting that structure around it and having the good habits that you've sort of formed for like 3 months or whatever you do in leading up to it, probably they definitely have a bigger effect on you and your life and everything else, don't they? So
yeah,
I think that focusing too much on the day or the hour can be a bit of a mistake unless you're someone who's making a career out of it. I think a bit more of a holistic view would probably benefit a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. And, I found that sometimes I feel like I preferred the training for a Hyrox rather than the actual Hyrox event. Because it's such a huge stimuli, and it's enjoyable because it's like highly dopaminergic and kind of such an attack on the senses. But do you get like the post Hyrox come down thing?
I've definitely had it before. I think it's probably dulled a little bit because I've done, I think, 10 or 11 now. So it's like anything, isn't it? You get used to it. But I have definitely, in the past, that week afterwards, just felt lost. And like, what am I going to do now? Sort of thing. But yeah, just taking a bit. I think what I always do now after I've done one is to just like write down some notes. As soon as I can get to like a notepad or whatever afterwards, I'll sit down and just write a couple of pages out of like what went well, what felt right, what felt wrong, what did I do good in the build up, what didn't go to plan, and then how am I going to sort of change this for the next one that I do. And that's been really, really useful because this last one that I've done in Olympia last weekend, it was the best time that I've done as an individual in the open category, but I didn't feel like I'd performed anything like as well as I could have. Whereas in the past, I've come off thinking I've put in a really good effort there, and I guess it's just that sort of that progress, isn't it? So whilst I've come off not feeling great, like I think I'll learn more from this one, the future ones, than I have off others that have perhaps gone to like more to plan. And it's just understanding where you are in that process, really. If you're someone that's going to do a few, take the first few that you do as like a lesson, like try different things, reflect on it, and then just reiterate and go again. Is sort of where I've seen people. It's worked for me, and I've seen other people that have done that as well. Like they've got into the analytical side, like you said before, rather than just thinking, "Oh, I've done a 120 there. Can I do a 115 next?" It's going a layer below that and saying, "How do I shave 15 seconds off per run?" Or I'm terrible at skiing compared to everyone else who's getting a similar time to me. Like, what do I need to do to get better at that? And yeah, the reflection's a big part of it. I think if you're somebody that's doing it to improve.
Yeah, 100%. It's that week afterwards is so, like you say, you can feel a little bit lost if it has been consuming you. So what's your sort of goal? Like, what's the next not just Hyrox, but everything. What can we expect from Chris over the next sort of 5 years?
No, I think like the 5 years is a difficult one, isn't it? Because 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that I would have done like a 3:19 marathon, ran 10 Hyrox. I don't even know if Hyrox was out there, but and then like speaking to you on a podcast about sort of that journey. So like 5 years, so much could change. But I'll be 40 like next year, so I think just been chatting around like a few mates and like coaches as to like some goals or like tests that I could do in terms of like fitness and strength to like try and benchmark where I'm at when I get to 40. That's something that I might like look at doing. Career wise, like it's been crazy, like the impact getting fit and getting into better habits has had on my career. So like progressing in my career and sort of looking to sort of benefit from like the financial and sort of development aspects of that. And I'd like to. I really enjoy like doing stuff like this. So like speaking with people like you who are on like a similar journey, have got like a similar outlook on life. So maybe doing my own podcast or linking up with someone who's doing something like that, or just trying to get people to take that first step into the journey that it took me so long to get into. Perhaps something along those sort of lines is where I see myself going. I think I've got this like little sort of personal mantra of like graft, which breaks down into like growth, relationships, adventure, fitness, and teaching. So it's like an acronym of graft, and I'm just basing everything around that, and it's really paid off for me since I set that up in my mind maybe 18 months ago. Like things have just been on another level, so that's working. I'm just going to concentrate on those. I think like those 5 pillars of like wellness for me are what's going to keep me moving in the right direction. I think if I can just make progress against each of those 5 things, then I'll just naturally get to where I want to be, as opposed to having a goal that's sort of 5 years away.
Awesome. And what about how long have you been married? 12 years, amazing.
12 years.
What's been your secret to staying married for 12 years?
It's we were talking about it recently, like my wife and I, and I think it's obviously like two people, isn't it? Like trying to make something better than the sum of just their own. So just understanding who you are, what you can bring to something, like to a relationship like that, and then just working at it. It's like anything. There's going to be times where things don't go as you want, but just acknowledging that you're in it together, like for the long run, talking about stuff. And I think like the way that we define like what a marriage is to us is that like the two of us are coming together to like make something better than we could if we were just two individuals. And then that like spans down into sort of how we treat like parenthood as well. So yeah, I've got like 2 sons, aged 9 and 7. Carving out times to do stuff with them, and as the 4 of us is like one of the biggest things that I'll like prioritise, and that has massive effects because we're just spending time together and like on the journey together. Really, like took them all down to London, and rather than it just be me going down to London to do a Hyrox and coming back, we made it into like a weekend down there, doing stuff for like the family. And I don't know if there is a secret, but it comes back to what we said, like knowing who you are and what you can add to somebody else, and then putting that together and seeing where you come to.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's nice to see. I seen your post the other day, and you mentioning about going down to London with the kids and stuff, and yeah, that's it's always nice to see. So before we wrap things up, where can I point people to follow your journey and etc.? chance to do a little bit of a plug.
Instagram. So like at Chris Mann X. Man is like double N. So Chris Mann X on Instagram is where I like to post things about sort of what I'm up to, things that I've learned, and try and put a bit of a twist on it as to how people might be able to like apply it to their own lives as well, based on what I've learned along sort of this journey up to now. That's it really. It's all through Instagram. So just keep an eye on that if you're interested in sort of the things that I've been saying, or you've resonated with any of it, because that's probably what I talk about sort of quite regularly.
Amazing.
On there.
Chris, thank you so much for this. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better, and I'm sure that we'll continue to connect and bump into you at the next Hyrox event.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Jason.
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
mate. Have a good day.
Cheers, you too.